The Detroit Lions finished the 2024 season with a 15-2 record and won the NFC North for the second straight year.
Down to the 10, Jameer to the 5, Jameer to the end zone, touchdown Detroit Lions! Gibbs from 13 yards out, and the Lions go 2 scores up!
It was a season teams and their fan bases dream of on the offensive side of the football, as they averaged over 33 points per game and scored 40 points 6 times over the course of the 2024 season. Unfortunately, they lost to the Jaden Daniels-led Washington Commanders in the divisional round of the playoffs, and in a span of 3 hours, the best season in franchise history became exactly that. History.
The Lions season was ended in the divisional round of the playoffs. Despite the disappointing ending, they are set to return as one of the Super Bowl favorites yet again.
But for as fun as the 2024 Lions season was at times, this was also a team that was mauled by injury throughout the year, specifically on the defensive side of the football. There was a point last year where the Lions had over 20 players on season-ending IR, yet they still battled through adversity, and when the 1 seed was on the line in Week 18 against the Minnesota Vikings, they beat their division rival by over 20 points. But because of the way their season ended against Washington, combined with both of their coordinators leaving this offseason, I think we're at a point where people are sleeping and underestimating the Detroit Lions. And I don't know who needs to hear this, but they're still one of the best teams in football. They're not going anywhere. They're still here, and they're still very much Super Bowl contenders. And in today's video, we're going to break down the 2025 Lions. If you could like the video before we start, I would really appreciate it, and without further ado, let's begin. And we are starting today's video by discussing who the Lions brought in and who they lost this offseason, and with the 2025 Lions, it has to start with losing not just one coordinator from last year, but both, as former offensive coordinator Ben Johnson is now the Chicago Bears head coach, and former defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn is now the New York Jets head coach. They also lost corner Carlton Davis in free agency, as he signed a 3-year, $54 million deal with the Patriots, just one offseason after being traded from the Bucs for a third-round pick. Unfortunately, as we know, the 2024 Lions defense was ravaged by injury, and Carlton Davis was not an exception. He unfortunately fractured his jaw in Week 15 against Buffalo last year, and because he was on a 1-year deal, that was his final game as a Lion. They also lost guard Kevin Zeitler in free agency to the Titans, and while this was not a loss in free agency, this absolutely has to be noted, and it's that center Frank Ragnow retired. So heading into 2025, the Lions had to replace not just one, but 2 interior offensive linemen in Frank Ragnow and Kevin Zeitler. Outside of those 3 players, and of course both coordinators, and even some position coaches who went with Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, the Lions didn't lose as many players as you may think in free agency. Edge Zadarius Smith was a player they traded for last year from Cleveland and is currently a free agent after being released by the Lions back in March. Outside of defensive back Ifeatu Melifonwu signing with the Dolphins on a 1-year, $3 million deal, every other player the Lions lost in free agency signed on deals worth less than $1.5 million per year. Corner Kendall Vildor went to the Bucs, defensive tackle Kyle Peko, who played 5 games with the Lions, went to the Patriots, and defensive end Jonah Williams, who played 2 games with the Lions, went to the Saints. Now, with how good Brad Holmes and company have drafted over the past several years, we are getting to a point where the Lions are going to be limited in terms of what they can do in free agency, and that's one of the trade-offs of having an elite football team. Would you rather pay Jared Goff, Penei Sewell, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and soon-to-be Aiden Hutchinson and Jamison Williams what they're worth, or try to be the kings of free agency? And that's my point with the Lions. Now, there's obviously good free agent signings, and Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry last year are great examples, but typically there's a reason teams would rather build through the draft than try and be free agency winners every year. But the one big player the Lions brought in free agency was a very good player in former Jets corner DJ Reed. DJ Reed is going to be a player Lions fans in the city of Detroit loves. He's tough, he's nasty, and he is everything that a Motor City Dan Campbell Detroit Lion represents. And when you hear the phrase build through the draft and supplement in free agency, this is the textbook definition of that. Having DJ Reed out there along with Amik Robertson, Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph, and 2024 first-round corner Terrion Arnold is a hell of a secondary. And whenever Carlton Davis left to sign with the Patriots in free agency, you knew they had to replace him, whether it be through the draft again, or like they ended up doing with DJ Reed in free agency. The rest of the Lions free agency was mostly bringing guys back like Live Onwuzurike, who is unfortunately out for the season due to an ACL tear, Tim Patrick, and Dan Skipper, but one other player they did bring in, which was a player I liked especially for depth, was defensive tackle Roy Lopez. You'll never hear me complain about a team bringing in beef, especially on a 1-year, $3.5 million deal that provides the Lions both depth and a bit of security if worse comes to worse, like it unfortunately did at several positions on the defensive side of the football last year. Now, speaking of the 2025 Lions defense, I don't know how you can't be anything but optimistic about this unit heading into the year. And the reason I mentioned the injury part during the Roy Lopez signing specifically was this team had every reason to quit last year. This team had every reason to say we're done and we can't come out of this, and to toss the year up to injury. But this team still finished top 5 in defensive DVOA and top 7 in defensive EPA per play. And I know the 2024 Lions offense received a lot of love, and rightfully so by the way, as that was truly one of the best offenses we've seen so far in the 21st century, and I do not say that lightly, but there seems to be this narrative that it was just the offense and that the defense was kind of just there, or average, and that wasn't the case. Now, it is unfortunate the Lions allowed 481 yards of opposing offense against Washington in the divisional round of the playoffs, but you don't accidentally allow the 7th fewest points and force the 10th most turnovers, along with both DVOA and EPA stats we just mentioned, by being an average run-of-the-mill defense. And I have been a big Aiden Hutchinson fan for a while, and was pretty vocal I thought he was well on his way to winning a Defensive Player of the Year award last year, before unfortunately suffering a broken leg against the Cowboys, and obviously we are not going to show that play. But when Hutch was injured after just 4.5 games into the year, he had 45 pressures on 198 pass rushing snaps. The league leader in pressures was Trey Hendrickson and Myles Garrett, who tied with 83 pressures, and each player had over 475 pass rushing snaps last year. Now, I do think Hutch was going to inevitably slow down a bit from a pressure standpoint, but he was on a different level last year, and if he returns to being the player he was, then the Lions are getting a Defensive Player of the Year caliber player back who will be in very favorable situations this year. And when you look at what the Lions' defensive philosophy is going to be under first-year defensive coordinator Kelvin Shepard, it's going to be to stop the run on early downs so that they can have guys like Aiden Hutchinson and Marcus Davenport, and even Aleem McNeil when he returns, get after the quarterback. And do you think it's a coincidence the Lions drafted a 325-plus pound defensive tackle in the first round of the draft this year, despite giving Aleem McNeil a $97 million contract extension in October, 6 or 7 months prior to the 2025 draft? And the answer is no. And that's going to be the goal of the 2025 Lions defense. Have everyone sell out and stop the run on early downs, and have Alex Anzalone and Jack Campbell, a very underrated linebacking duo by the way, fill gaps and force teams into 3rd and 7 and 3rd and 8. That way you have to throw the ball against the 2024 interception leader in Kirby Joseph, as well as one of the most underrated players in football in Brian Branch. Barring injury, of course, because that's going to be a big thing to follow with the 2025 Lions, and unfortunately 2024 second-round corner Ennis Rakestraw Jr. is already out for the year, but this is one of the best defenses in football. The only real concern I have is a second edge rusher behind Aiden Hutchinson. I'm definitely not sold on Marcus Davenport, and he is the definition of a wild card, as he has played in 6 total games over the last 2 years, but what you see from the 2025 Lions defense from afar is, in a lot of ways, what you get. And as simple as the idea is, their goal is going to be to stop the run and to force you to throw against a secondary that intercepted the 5th most passes out of any team in the NFL last year, and basically say, beat us. Oh, and by the way, in terms of complementary football, this team is one of the best at that too because of how good they are as an offense. Their goal is simple: get up on you quick offensively and have a DPOY caliber pass rusher get after your quarterback with a first-team all-pro ball-hawking safety waiting for you to test him in the secondary. The only thing I worry about is a second pass rusher, and unfortunately what was detrimental to this team last year: health. I like Aaron Glenn as a defensive coach, and he deserves a lot of credit for what he did last year when it was hell or high water with his team down the stretch, but when healthy, this is a very, very good defense. The 2025 Lions rookie impact. I'll be honest, I don't think it's going to be all that much. Now, I know that may sound like a hot take, but we're going to back it up for a couple of reasons. And it's not because Tyleik Williams, Tate Ratledge, and Isaac Tesla are all going to be draft busts. It's anything but that. It is a testament to how well Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell have built this roster since taking over back in 2021. Their first draft back in 2021 was a slam dunk. Any team would love to have this type of class. They brought in Penei Sewell, Aleem McNeil, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, and a couple couple of other players as well, but those were the 3 big hits in a draft. They signed all 3 players to $90+ million contract extensions, and Penei Sewell and Amon-Ra specifically had $100+ million contract extensions. And as if that's not enough to kickstart a rebuild, in 2022 they had Aiden Hutchinson, Jamison Williams, and first-team All-Pro safety Kirby Joseph, all of which are going to be paid soon, and Kirby Joseph already has been paid. Those are 2 slam dunk drafts to start a rebuild, and we really started to see the changes that the Lions were making towards the end of the 2022 season, and they ended the year 9-8 and on a good run, and in the final game of 2022, they prevented the Green Bay Packers from getting to the postseason and sent Aaron Rodgers home in what was his final game as a Green Bay Packer. 2023, I will be honest, this was one of the best draft classes in the past decade, and I do think the word generational, as we often refer to it on the channel as the G word, is used far too often to discuss draft prospects. You'll see a good first-round receiver, kind of like Tetairoa McMillan this year. People will toss around the word generational, and no disrespect to Tetairoa McMillan, he just was not a generational receiving prospect. He was a very good first-round prospect, but just because a player is a first-round prospect does not mean they're generational. But what I will say is the 2021 through 2023 Lions draft class run was a generational run by Brad Holmes. And their 2023 class was absolutely phenomenal as they selected Jahmyr Gibbs, Jack Campbell, Brian Branch, and Sam Laporta with their first 4 selections in the 2023 draft. That type of run is unprecedented, and we've seen it through the first 2 years, and the Lions have not accidentally won 27 games over the past 2 years. You don't accidentally go 27-7, and how all of this ties into the 2025 draft class is because of how the Lions have built this roster over the past 4 years since Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell took over. Naturally, the roster is now very complete, and inevitably, there's going to be limitations to the impact that all of these guys can have. And Isaac Tesla specifically, we look at a receiver, a 3rd-round receiver from Arkansas. I kind of ask the question, okay, hey, you are now the Lions offensive coordinator. Are you going to dial up a play to Isaac Tesla on the first play of the game? Or are you going to try to get Jahmyr Gibbs, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams, or Sam Laporta the football, or even David Montgomery the football? And that's kind of my point pertaining to the 2025 Lions rookie impact. Now, for the actual impact the Lions 2025 draftees will have, it's of course going to start with first-round selection Tyleik Williams, a big defensive tackle from Ohio State, and this is going to be a player that Lions fans are going to love over the course of time, maybe aside from the school that he went to, but this is a player that's going to do a lot of the things that Aleem McNeil does, which is plug holes in the run game and be able to push the pocket as an interior rusher. Now, Tyleik Williams, like Aleem McNeil, is never going to have a season where he's going to have 30 quarterback hits and 14 sacks, and him and Hutch are going to be having conversations week to week of, man, you had 2 sacks last week, I had 1.5, I'm going to get 3 this week, and you get the point, right? Aleem McNeil's career high in tackles is 41. His career high in quarterback hits is 10, and his career high in sacks is 5. Tyleik Williams does not need to be a prime Aaron Donald for this selection to quote-unquote be worth it. He's going to do his job, and he's going to do his job at a high level, but when you ask the question of what is the actual impact he's going to have this year, I'm going to be honest, I don't think it's going to be all that high, especially from a stat sheet standpoint because of Aleem McNeil already being there as well as DJ Reader. Like we mentioned during the during the defensive portion of the video, the Lions' defensive goal this year is going to be to stop the run on early downs, hence the reason of having 3 defensive tackles on the roster north of 325 pounds, and to be able to force you into situations where you have to pass the football against their great secondary. So, Tyleik Williams' rookie impact this year, if he has anything higher than 35 or 40 tackles, and if he has 10 quarterback hits as well as 3.5 or 4 sacks, then he is doing his job at a high level for what he was drafted to be, and that is the biggest thing to hammer home with the 2025 Lions draft. Tyleik Williams is not going to be Aaron Donald. He's not going to be Dexter Lawrence just because he's a big defensive tackle. He's going to come in, fill gaps in the run game, push the pocket from an interior standpoint, not make a huge impact on the stat sheet, but play a very valuable role. Tate Ratledge was the team's 2nd-round selection, an offensive lineman from Georgia, and this is going to be a player that replaces Kevin Zeitler, who played right guard for the Lions last year, and there may be a couple of welcome to the NFL moments for Tate Ratledge early on, but this is a player who has a pretty high floor, all things considered, and he's also pretty nasty as an offensive lineman, and he's definitely going to be a player that Lions fans love, and he's a guy that's going to play next to Penei Sewell, and having your right side of the line be 2 guys with nasty demeanors in Tate Ratledge and Penei Sewell is exactly what Dan Campbell wants, and Tate Ratledge is, in the best way, a Detroit Lion with how they've built their team over the past couple of years. Now, Isaac Tesla, the 3rd-round selection from Arkansas, was a player who grew up a Lions fan, and whenever he took his pro visit to the Lions before the draft, he was actually wearing a Lions jersey, which was pretty cool, and Lions fans obviously have attached themselves to Tesla over the first couple of weeks of the preseason, and he's done a tremendous job so far in the preseason. But in terms of actual rookie impact, I think his ceiling's going to be pretty limited, and it's not Isaac Tesla slander. It's, of course, because of how good everyone is on the offense. Jahmyr Gibbs just had a 1,900 total yard season, and inevitably when Jahmyr Gibbs or Amon-Ra or Jameson or Sam Laporta or, again, David Montgomery get the football, naturally that's going to limit the 2025 Lions draft class production. But the Lions are a complete team. They know they do everything together as a team, so I don't think Isaac Tesla, especially with growing up as a Lions fan and seeing this team firsthand grow the way that it has over the past couple of years, I don't think he's going to be a diva receiver that's going to complain that he doesn't have 57 catches in his rookie season and that the team wins less games because he has more production, rather than a player that comes in and has 30 receptions and the team wins 13 or 14 games during his rookie year. So while the Lions' 2025 rookie impact is probably not going to be a lot, it is not a reflection of this draft class. It is a reflection of how loaded this roster is. The 2025 Lions offensive discussion has to start by mentioning that former offensive coordinator Ben Johnson is now the Chicago Bears head coach. Ben Johnson is without a doubt one of the best offensive minds in football and is being replaced by John Morton. John Morton was with the Lions back in 2022 as a senior offensive assistant, and he was the passing game coordinator for the Broncos over the past 2 years and is now the Lions offensive coordinator. Now, one thing that I think is frustrating to read pretty regularly on social media is this kind of belief that the Lions' offensive success was made by Ben Johnson. Not the fact that they're elite at nearly every position, but because Ben Johnson is Ben Johnson, that he just made everybody play better. And while there is some truth that Ben Johnson maximized some of the players' abilities in 2024, specifically Jahmyr Gibbs in the year that he had and the rise of Amon-Ra St. Brown over the past couple of years, whenever that belief is said, there's kind of almost this implication that Dan Campbell is just this big meathead that doesn't know what's going on, that he basically walks into meetings and says, I have no idea what's going on, just play tough, and we're going to win games and go for it on fourth down. And that type of disrespect really just frustrates me with Dan Campbell, because Dan Campbell is without a doubt one of the smartest NFL coaches there is in today's NFL. Now, will there be a bit of an adjustment period by having John Morton as the team's OC? Probably yes, but there's also going to be an adjustment period without Frank Ragnow, a Hall of Fame talent at center as well. And Frank Ragnow being in the Hall of Fame discussion is going to hurt his case because he played in the same era as Jason Kelce, but he was without a doubt a top 5 center for plural multiple years. So there will be a bit of a transition period both from the OC aspect and the center aspect. But guys, when you have everybody on the Lions offense that they have, Jahmyr Gibbs, Penei Sewell, Amon-Ra, Sam Laporta, everybody, they're going to be a very good unit, barring health, of course. Now, is there going to be a bit of a decline this year in terms of points per game and in terms of what they do from 24 to 25? Probably yes, but this was the 13th highest points per game scoring offense in NFL history. So, believe it or not, yes, I think there's going to be a bit of a decline when you lose an OC and 2 offensive linemen as well, but to act like the Lions are done and the way that people want to write this team off and that, 2024 was the Lions' best chance, while all of those things may be true, I think there's a bit of a comfortability factor when people are writing the 2025 Lions off and basically saying, oh, Ben Johnson's gone, Frank Ragnow retired, Kevin Zeitler's gone. There's no way that they're going to be able to maximize what they did last year while not factoring everything that happened to them on the defensive side of the football, and that people are too comfortable writing this team off like they just didn't have a top 15 offense in NFL history. Again, there's probably going to be a decline, but Jared Goff is a very good quarterback, and he was a top 5 quarterback for most of last year. Jahmyr Gibbs is an offensive player of the year caliber running back, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if he did win the offensive player of the year. Amon-Ra St. Brown has back-to-back seasons of 100 receptions and over 1,000 yards and double-digit touchdowns and is one of the best receivers in the NFL. Jameson Williams is a player that went for over 1,000 yards last year, and I mean this in the absolute best way possible. Jameson Williams will always be limited during his time in Detroit because there's only one football to go around, but I really think Jameson Williams is going to be a player that in 15 or 20 years, if you look back and you're having a conversation with your nephew or maybe even your own son in 15 or 20 years, and you say, hey, Jameson Williams was a lot better than what his numbers actually showed because he only finished with 2 1,000-yard seasons or 3 1,000-yard seasons, and based on the impact that he has on a play-to-play basis, He is going to be that type of player. Sam Laporta is without a doubt a top 10 tight end in football, and like we mentioned, the Lions' offensive line is one of the best in the NFL. So whenever you factor everything in, why would this team not be a top 10 or even a top 5 offense in 2025? Did Ben Johnson personally have that much responsibility for everybody's success within the 2024 Lions offense? Yes, there's obviously a little bit of a factor within that, but do you think Jared Goff's going to forget how to play football? Is Jahmyr Gibbs going to lose his explosiveness? Is Jamison Williams going to go from a borderline Olympic level athlete to a guy that's going to run a 4.7 40 in one offseason just because Ben Johnson moved from the Motor City to the Windy City? No. And that's what really frustrates me with people writing this team off before the season even starts. Now, did I go on a bit of a tangent there about how good the Lions offense is? Yes, admittedly, but when you look at this team's schedule this year, do you circle any game and legitimately think there is absolutely zero chance the Lions go in and win? And they have several tough games this year. Now, I will be honest, I think that there is a very, very low percent chance that they repeat 15 wins. Whenever you have games on the schedule like at Baltimore, at Kansas City, at Philly, at Washington, at Minnesota and Green Bay, it's going to be difficult to repeat 15 wins, especially when you have all of those difficult road games. But for Detroit and where they currently are, the bottom line is if they get into the postseason, they are as dangerous as anybody. As we've seen over the past couple of years, one of the best things that translates to postseason success is being able to run the football and being able to stop the run and get after the quarterback. And in a lot of ways, that is the entire Lions philosophy. So while there may be these 15 or 20 word play calls or whatever the case may be, a lot of the times in football, as simple as it is, it's going to come down to being able to run the ball and to be able to stop the run and to put your defense in advantageous situations. And what also has to be remembered is, despite the fact that the Lions lost last year at home to the Jaden Daniels-led Commanders in the divisional round, and also the fact that they allowed nearly 500 yards of offense, is they turned the ball over 5 times and they were still not in a position to win, but they still kept the game close, and despite turning the ball over 5 times, they still put up over 30 points in their lone playoff game. They are an elite football team, and they are without a doubt one of the best rosters in the entire NFL entering 2025. Now, from a stat projection for the 2025 Lions, if Jared Goff plays at least 16 games, I think he'll be pretty comfortably over 4,000 yards, as well as throwing for 30 touchdowns again. Now, admittedly, the rest of the Lions offense is difficult to project because they have a new offensive coordinator, and the reality is there's probably going to be games where Jamison Williams has 2 catches for 24 yards in a game that Jahmyr Gibbs has 184 yards and 3 total touchdowns, and in theory, Sam Laporta did have a, not sophomore slump, but he had a decline from his rookie year because he had over 25 less receptions and over 100 less yards and 3 less touchdowns than he did from 23 to 24. But when you have a running back on your team go for 1,900 total yards and you have 2 1,000-yard receivers in Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jamison Williams and an all-pro receiver in Amon-Ra St. Brown, again, there's only one football to go around, and that kind of also applies to third-round rookie Isaac Tesla as well, because there's going to be guys' numbers who take a hit because of the rest of the success the offense is having. So I do think Jahmyr Gibbs will be a 1,500 total yard back again. I will go ahead and say that he is one of the best in the NFL, and I do not say that lightly at the running back position. And I would imagine, based on the targets that he's had over the past couple of years, and as durable and as sturdy as a player as he is, that Amon-Ra will probably have another 100 reception, 1,000-yard season. Touchdowns can be a little tricky to project for a receiver because if they want to, double team or take away Amon-Ra in the red zone, then David Montgomery, a touchdown machine in his own right, can have double-digit touchdowns. So I will stay away from the touchdown projections for every player because somebody could have 19, somebody could have 4, and you get the point. But the bottom line is, if this team stays healthy, they will be a top 10, if not a top 5 offense pretty comfortably. They're one of the best teams in all of football, and this team's ceiling is a Super Bowl win. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, as we recently had 200,000 subscribers, and I truly cannot thank you guys enough for the support. Until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.